Snide?
No, well,
Yes.
you see, a classmate of mine, sort of about 2 years ago, that was when we weren't really that famous that we were together, but
Yeah.
we
It
were
was
just
the first
getting...
article in America on us both since we got together.
It was very important for me,
In look.
actually, because we sort of, I was introduced to America through that article, and she was a classmate of mine, so I thought, oh, that's nice. So she came, and I thought, well, you know, since we are friends, so I should cook for her and all that, and I made a nice lunch for her. And then she wrote that, what was it? That,
Oh, she said Yoko was, looked fat like an old witch cooking. She was 9 months pregnant and just had a miscarriage. And that...
I resembled
Ernest Borgnine, you know. Well, you can see that she doesn't. And that was this old pal that had sneaked in to see us under the pretext.
You do like Ernest Borgnine?
No, I like...
I just want to say Betty Rollins' legs.
Was it Betty Rollin who wrote the article? Oh.
Good old Betty, old pal of Yoko's.
Yeah.
Betty Rollins' legs.
She said something about...
Betty Rollins' legs. Okay, I think we can leave that one out. It's silly to be so bitter, isn't it?
Oh, yes, there's something about her legs. I never noticed anything wrong with her legs when I was married to her.
Did you? You weren't looking, obviously.
No.
She kept them long skirts on all the time.
I was never. In fact, as a matter of fact, no, I wasn't. But she wrote an article recently in which she said I was delicious.
Well, maybe she's had a pill or something.
All right. But do you have, you don't go to reunions at Sarah Lawrence. You were only there about a year then, I gather.
3 years, actually.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to graduate, you know. I was one of those early dropouts. I just felt it was so ridiculous to go another year. I just couldn't stand it. And in those days, people said, well, it's so silly to not graduate, you know, that bit.
Because you'll never get a job.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I was a bit afraid of that, of course.
You'll never make it. That's what they told me, too.
That if you didn't finish school.
One master wrote, you're on the road to failure if he carries on this way.
Do you ever see your old schoolmates?
No, I've seen a few old school friends, not teachers. No.
Yeah.
Most of them dislike me, except for one or two, you know. So I am always glad to remind them.
Was there ever a teacher that...
incredible awareness they had.
Was there ever a teacher who did inspire you?
Yes, there was always one teacher in each school that would usually be an art teacher or an English language or literature kind of thing. If there's anything to do with writing or art, I was okay at it. Anything to do with science or maths, I just couldn't get it in, you know.
Yeah.
So, but most subjects were science and maths because supposedly they don't want artists, you know. Even at art school, they tried to turn me into a teacher. They tried to discourage you from painting and, you know, why not be a teacher? Because then you can paint on Sunday. I decided against it.
You know, your drawings look a little like James Thurber's.
Well, I used to love his stuff when I was a kid.
Oh, did
there
you?
was two people.
Look like a bit like yours, you know, I think.
Well, he's older than me, so he came first, so I look like him. I used to read those stuff when I was a kid. Three people I was very keen on: Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, Thurber, and an English drawer, or whatever you call him, called Ronald Searle.
Ronald Searle. Oh, we get him over here.
Yeah. So when I was about 11, I was turned on to those three. When I was, well, I think I was about 15 when I started Thurberizing the drawings. You know.
Oh, yeah. Yes. That was my imitation of Nigel Bruce, one of your actors.
I saw.
Oh, really, Holmes? Remember he played Watson in the Sherlock Holmes movies?
Yes.
Oh, really, Holmes? It's dynamite, usually.
Ella Fitzgerald, dear Watson.
You thought it was Ella Fitzgerald?
No, Ella Fitzgerald, dear Watson. That's a pun on Elementary.
Oh, Elementary, my dear Watson. That's right.
Yeah.
Ella Fitzgerald. That's known as wordplay.
Yes.
Oh, I can play that.
Myself.
Sure.
Betty Rollins' legs. Our local station.
We will be rolling further after this message from our local station. We're trying to figure out what it is I forgot that I wanted to ask you earlier.
I just want to thank you for playing Paul's tunes to me. It's very nice of you. Wonderful, thank you. I always get it. I sat in a restaurant in Spain and the violinist insisted on playing Yesterday right in my ear. And then he asked me to sign the violin and I didn't know what to say. I said, well, actually, okay, and I signed it and Yoko signed it and one day he's going to find out that Paul wrote it.
That's better than if they'd played Wedding Bells Are Breaking Up, That Old Gang of Mine.
I guess so.
Maybe I should have saved that for later. You know, well, let's talk about that for a second, because you know, Yoko, you've even been called the Dragon Lady, who
Yes.
the lady who brought the Beatles apart and took them all
Well, she
apart.
took
I
them
have trouble
apart.
with English.
Can we please give her the credit for all the nice music that George made and Ringo made and Paul made and I've made since they broke up? If she did it.
That's true. And now,
It turned out all right, didn't it?
yeah.
Anyway,
But
you know
you're aware
what-
of that. I mean, that the press always
yes,
saw you as the wedge that was driven in.
The wedge.
I don't know how you can drive a wedge in 3 places or whatever, how many spaces there are between 4 people, but that was the. There are millions of girls who would love to have met, let alone married, one of the 4. Any one of the 4, probably, but certainly a lot of them.
Well, I resent to think of him as one of the 4, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, or any one of the 4, etc. Because I just met him as another artist and all that, and I didn't, particularly realize that part of it, really.
You were a Beatles fan before, or would you say you were a Lennon fan before?
Neither.
Neither. Didn't care for
She
either
didn't
of
really
them?
know about us.
No,
the
I
only
really
name
didn't
she knew
know.
was Ringo, because it means apple in Japanese. And so. Ringo means apple.
Ringo means apple.
Yeah.
Did you know that
So-
when you named your company Apple?
No, no.
Oh. It was just one of those happy accidents.
Just one of those happy apples, yes.
Happy applesauce.
Well,
Right number of
Happy
syllables.
Christmas.
Ringo, if you spell it sideways, spells groin.
yes. Star backwards is rats.
I know, and there are a lot of. Do you do those things too? I find that I'm
when I
always
go along the road in the car, I'm always doing the signpost backwards. Anyway, she didn't split the Beatles because how could one girl split the Beatles or one woman? You know, the Beatles were drifting apart on their own. You know.
Can you remember when you realized that it was inevitable that you would split up?
No,
First,
no. It's
was
like
there anyone-
saying, did you remember falling in love? Not quite.
Yeah.
No. It just sort of happens.
How long was it fun?
Yeah, well, everything's fun off and on, you know. So I suppose it could have gone on being fun off and on, or it could have gone worse, I don't know. It's just that when you grow up, you know, we don't want to be the crazy gang, which they might know over here, which is British, or the Marx Brothers, which is sort of being dragged on stage playing She Loves You when we've got, asthma and tuberculosis, and when we're 50, you know. Here they are again, yesterday, all my troubles. So a long time ago, I said that I didn't want to be singing She Loves You when I'm 30. I said that when I was about 25 or something, which in a roundabout way meant that I wouldn't be doing whatever I was doing then, you know, at 30. Well, I was 30 last October, and that's about when my life changed, really.
Especially for John, I can say that he's at least sort of outgrown, whatever they were in, Because I think it's very difficult for 4 artists who are so brilliant and talented to be together and do everything together, I mean, just impossible almost. So whatever they were doing was almost miraculous, that they were together at all.
With all the pressures and everything
Yes,
that they
yes,
had.
and,
I guess the Hard Day's Night, everybody thought that was what life really was like for you, and that a man with a handheld camera had managed to capture the essence of Beatle life, and that it was always just flitting about in a lovely, carefree, joyful way.
Well,
was it ever like that?
It wasn't that carefree ever. It was a lot more pressure. That was a sort of comic strip version of what actually was going on, The pressure was far heavier than that. And that was written after the author spending about 3 days with us when we played in London and then in Dublin and then back in London again. He wrote the whole of the film based on our characters, clod-hopping Ringo, sharp John, whimsical Paul, and stern George. All those, the Beatle character myths were formed from 3 days watching us, which was a lot of junk, really.
Would you like me to get that for you?
No, thank you.
Oh.
I don't believe
She's
in
a
it.
female lib, you see.
That's why I hesitated, because I've had my fingers snapped off by ladies on the show that I tried to light.
But you do like men's cigarettes as well sometimes, if you feel like it. If you're feeling gay,
Wow. I do.
Well, one does like any sexy cigarettes, Betty Rowling, don't we?
I mean,
John, I
for a
interrupted
woman-
you, though.
Did you?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
You
No,
were
what
saying.
I meant was, as a woman, it's such a nuisance to have to wait for somebody, that bit too.
And do you make a point of opening the door for yourself?
No, I don't make a point of it. You know, when I'm tired, it's always very nice if somebody opens. But I don't, you know, at the same time, I don't make a point about just waiting. You know, that is silly too, I think. You know.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I disrupted something there, or I interrupted it.
Well,
really. We were talking about the fact that the impression in the Beatles movie that was the
oh, well, that was it, really.
Comic strip version of what life's like.
Well, that was all I had to say, really. It was a comic strip version, and it sort of stuck with us. And now for a small message from "We'll be back," something like that.
He's right about that. We have a station break, and we'll be back. Oh, we're back again, and Yoko.
Yes.
You work in film.
Yes.
Yeah, and John has referred to you somewhere.
Both do, actually, but, you know,
Both of you.
yes.
But John said somewhere that you were one of the best unknown artists in the world.
The most famous unknown artist in the world, she is, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because she's been in the so-called avant-garde world of New York for almost 15 years, producing...
How many?
15 years, about.
Well,
it's a long... 10.
Sounds like
something like that. And she was quite an established artist before she met me, and then once she met me, then she became Mrs. Lennon. And... well, that's when they started calling her a Japanese actress, you know, when in fact she never appeared in any movie up till then, and really, but mainly, and she'd been directing movies and having gallery shows and theatre shows and things like that, and then it got swamped with Mrs. Lennon, but now it's just about turning around. People are realising that she's an artist in her own right, but she's still the most famous unknown artist. Yeah. Do you want to comment on that?
That was brought up because of this film that we're going to see.
Yeah, we have a piece of a film that you did. It's not, maybe the most famous film you did was one called Bottoms.
I think so.
Bottoms, which was in fact a film of bottoms.
It was called Number 4, actually.
Yeah.
364 bottoms, 5 bottoms, that was it.
364 or 365?
365 bottoms, one for each day of the year.
Day of the year, yeah.
But it actually didn't contain 365 because I thought, well, nobody's going to really... It's a conceptual number, you know, and they couldn't possibly count it, so...
You mean that in some cases the bottoms were the same one
No,
posing as other
There might be
bottoms?
about 100 in it. You see, the interesting thing about the film is all the bottoms were the intellectual and artist people in London. And the soundtrack of the film is all of them trying to explain and be very uncomfortable about why they're taking the trousers off. Some guy saying, well, I normally do Shakespeare, you know. And then you see his bottom just, and it's not cut to each bottom, but the whole screen is just 2 bottoms to each side of the buttocks walking like that. Yeah. And all these comments are saying, well, you know, like I normally do Shakespeare, and what's it all about, and the real philosophy about taking your trousers off, and they're all jabbering on like that.
They were intellectuals, so they just had to sort of rationalize it somehow, you know, so they'd bring out Gurdjieff and Sartre and everybody out, you know, before they just take off their pants, and it was really funny. But the point was that I was asking to look for intellectual bottoms, you know. They have
intellectual bottoms,
yes, yeah. And so they would say, well, is this intelligent enough or whatever, you know. And when you look at it on the screen, it's just all the same, and that was the point, yeah.
There's a show here called New Faces. What would you call... Well, never mind. Can we take a look at the piece of film you have?
Are you going to explain about it?
Tell us what we should
quickly
look
say
for.
that this is a female lead film in sort of a quiet sort of way. And it's like a diary, you know. It's about a woman who's naked and who's lying down. And the fly sort of crawling over her body. And later it gradually becomes 4 and 5 flies all crawling over her body. And the message is like, you know, there's lots of things in it and all sorts of level of understanding, I'm sure, but it has something to do with, you know, a life of a woman who is more like taking it rather than, you know, doing it positively. The flies crawling over you and just taking it, you know.
Passive woman. Let's take a look at that. Oh, we'll take a look at that in exactly 6 seconds because the film has a certain amount of
exactly 6 fingers time. We'll look at it.
About now.
Take me away, 'cause I'm going.